It's the Security Weekly News, Take 3, episode 348. I'm Doug White, and welcome to the week of 10 December 2023. We've got Cybertruck, Viagra, Struts, Atlassian, Log4Shell, Pharmacies, security clearances, naughty bots, Jason Wood, and more on this edition of the Security Weekly News.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for the Security Weekly News. AI, accelerated cloud adoption, and hybrid work are fundamentally shifting how business gets done. The old way of securing your people, apps, and data doesn't work and scale anymore. To stay ahead, today's organizations need to reimagine their security and networking infrastructure with a cloud-first, unified SASE architecture. Join Palo Alto Networks and leading technologists from across the globe for SASE Converge 2023, a two-day virtual experience, November 15th and 16th. Revealing how SASE powered by advanced AI can drive better security and networking outcomes. Register today at securityweekly.com/Palo Alto.
Hi folks, I'm Adrian Sanabria, the host of Enterprise Security Weekly. Every week, we interview the most interesting folks we can find, talking about the most pressing cybersecurity issues and challenges facing the enterprise today. Myself and my co-hosts have each been in the industry for decades, long enough to see the patterns in the industry and explore where trends are going. In addition to enterprise challenges, we also follow the vendor space, the most interesting security startups emerging, technology and product trends, all of the most interesting funding and acquisition announcements. Finally, we love to discuss the latest trends in tech and how they'll impact cybersecurity. If you're wondering how the latest in AI, quantum computing, cloud, and DevOps is going to impact security a few years down the road, you should follow the Enterprise Security Weekly podcast.
All right, welcome to Security Weekly News. I'm Doug White, and so what do we got here? Well, we haven't talked about Struts in a while. We used to talk about Struts a lot. I mean, I remember this time when it was just it seemed like every week there was a new Struts story, but I haven't actually seen the word Struts in a while. Well, Apache, who was the developer, patched a critical severity file upload vulnerability in Struts 2. The vulnerability can be exploited to allow arbitrary code execution remotely. And the issue was, quote, an attacker can manipulate the file upload parameters to enable path traversal, and under some circumstances, this can lead to uploading a malicious file, which can be used to perform remote code execution. They didn't really say how that worked. But that was according to Apache. Source Inside reported the vulnerability, which affects, quote, a few versions of Struts. So if you're using the open source framework in your website, which you may well be, you definitely are going to want to patch this thing up. Apache said that the patch is a drop-in replacement and very easy to upgrade. They didn't mention if there's any evidence of this vulnerability being used in the wild, but it probably will be, if it's not already, to drop remote code execution files onto your web server. So if you are supporting these things, please patch this before you are one of the additional Struts victims going forward. Now, I saw this story today, and I have to say, when I had a security clearance, and I did have a security clearance with the federal government, and I got in trouble twice. Literally, I got in trouble for making a joke like, I wonder what the Russians would give me for this. Here come these guards. Somebody turned me in because I made a joke. But this kid in Massachusetts, Jack Teixeira, who for some reason had a top secret clearance despite everything that had been said and done previously, still had a top secret clearance. When I had a top secret clearance, they were very strict about it. I know somebody who lost theirs because there was a suspicion that they might have been drinking and driving. I know I made a joke, which was honestly a joke. It was a total joke. So I guess they just don't take this as seriously as they used to. And we were cleaning out a filing cabinet. This is what was happening. We were cleaning out a filing cabinet so that they could move it to our new office. And I said, we could just sell this to the Russians and save ourselves a lot of trouble. I wonder what they would give us for it. And my clerk ratted me out to the man. You know what you did. but I had to go to special training because of this. Literally. Now, this guy's friends were warning people about him. And when they do top secret clearances, they go around and talk to your friends. And the guy's friends were turning him in for all the crazy stuff he was saying and doing at high school and later. Yet he still got this. He was carrying top secret documents off of an Air Force base and sharing them on Discord. And yeah, some of the people in his group were Russians. So wait a minute. How come he was able to do that? Well, he eventually, now he's in prison, but the Air Force disciplined 15 people connected with this leak and concluded that multiple officials intentionally failed to take required action on his suspicious behavior per the Inspector General. So not only did they not do the right thing, they knew it and they intentionally didn't do anything about it. Now, this kid, Teixeira, is sitting in jail right now, but back in the day, I think quite a few of these other people would have been joining him, at least in the place that I worked. So my point here, and the reason I brought this story to you at all, test your processes. You know, we say this a lot. You need to test these controls. Can somebody walk off the base with a top secret document? Now, when I was doing this, they searched my briefcase every single day. They searched it coming in. They searched it going out. If I had a folder with top secret documents in my briefcase, I would have gone to Fort Leavenworth and I'd probably still be sitting there today. But this kid did just that, walked off the base repeatedly. So test your controls. This is why we do that stuff, and you got to test them. Atlassian, Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket, and macOS Companion app users have been warned to update their software immediately due to 4 critical vulnerabilities which allow for remote code execution. I mean, remote code execution is like the mnemonic plague these days. You know, mnemonic was a lot worse than bubonic. And, you know, mnemonic I mean, literally, when you see remote code execution, you just want to run and paint like a cross on the front door of the house and, you know, like bar the windows. Atlassian did disclose these vulnerabilities last week, and they said they are more likely than not to be used in exploitation campaigns. And of course, now that they're documented, they most definitely will be. Atlassian is based in Australia, and they say they have more than 260,000 customers worldwide, and that's in more than 190 countries, and including 2/3 of their customers are Fortune 500 companies, which are heavy targets anyway. So, yeah. One of the most severe issues was rated 9.8 severity and would require Jira customers to uninstall Assets Discovery Agent software from every device before they can patch this thing. So it's not going to be a minor fix like the Struts one. Another one was rated 9.8. It's actually from back in 2022 and impacts about a dozen Atlassian products. So since all of these different vulnerabilities can be used to remotely execute code, well, in the industry, we call this bad. Now, last month, Kerber ransomware was being injected using an older Confluence bug. So if you have any of these products from Atlassian, and you may well, today would be a really, really good day to start getting your patching plan and your mitigation plan in order before these things are used to take over whatever you've got. And then you'll be explaining it to somebody else. In fact, in the United States, in a week, you will be explaining under the new disclosure rules in the United States. This is the 18th of December, so that's a week from yesterday. Publicly traded companies in the United States that suffer a material cyber attack will be required to file details of the attack with the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is called the SEC, within 4 working days. So no more of this, you know, a year later we release a little bit. They're saying you got to file an 8K, which is what that report is called, within 4 working days of a breach happening. Now, this rule was an attempt to increase transparency and to try to ensure that attacks are dealt with in a standardized fashion. But critics of the rules say that it's unrealistic time frame, that it has unnecessary demands that will further strain the already strained cybersecurity workforce. All of that sounds pretty realistic. Now, you can get deferred filing, and boy, this thing just keeps it starts sounding worse and worse, because now you've got the SEC, that's one government agency. A second government agency, the Department of Justice, is responsible for determining if you should receive a deferral on having to do this filing. But even the Department of Justice is using the FBI to administer all this. So now you're dealing, I mean, FBI is part of the Department of Justice, but you're basically dealing with multiple government agencies. You have 4 days, and you're going to have to deal with all this. The Department of Justice has to be satisfied that withholding the information is merited. And initially, they said only on national security or public safety grounds, which is that kind of like you're going to have to say, it was coming right for us kind of nonsense, in order to avoid having to file within 4 days or be in violation of SEC rules. Now, the FBI published guidelines last week on the reporting requirements. So if you're publicly traded, you probably should be reading up on this with corporate legal right about now. And a policy notice that described the FBI as the agency responsible for dealing with victim companies wanting to delay filing their 8K report after the attack. Now, concerns over this about what is a material event. So there's some people arguing, I'm probably in corporate legal, about what is a material event and what triggers a requirement and when does it trigger it, and all this will end up eventually being decided in court. But the FBI says an event is material if, quote, there is a substantial likelihood that a reasonable shareholder would consider it important when making an investment decision. Okay, so basically that would be everything, right? I mean, some shareholder would consider almost anything important, so I don't know. But the FBI said that their role was going to be to receive and review the delay request. I presume they're assuming there's going to be a lot of those. So if the Department of Justice decides the delay is justified, an initial 30-day delay can be granted and then an option for 30 more days in, quote, extraordinary circumstances. You can actually get even more days if you have really extraordinary circumstances, so they can give you 60 more days if you can prove all this. Any delays beyond that, then you'd have to go back to the SEC with another filing. Now, the FBI encouraged companies to contact them as soon as the incident is discovered. Of course, corporate legal may be saying something other than that, but they went on and said they would only process a delay request if it was made at the same time as the company determined it was dealing with a material incident. So that means you say, something happened, I'm supposed to report it to the FBI right now, and I also need to request a delay. So basically, from the way this reads to me, it means every single company will request a delay immediately. I mean, that'll just be because they don't have a choice. They got 4 days to deal with all this from the moment they call. So as soon as they call the FBI, they're probably going to have to file a request for delay. If you're publicly traded in the U.S., I would be reading up on this right now because you don't have much time before you're going to need a policy in place. Remember Log4Shell? Yeah, maybe you don't. Pepperidge Farm remembers, and so does Lazarus. Our old buddies Lazarus Group. Despite Log4Shell being so last year, they are still using it to exploit organizations and install one of 3 new remote access Trojans, which they've developed that are written in all the languages you just thought of in your head, because I'm sure all of you thought of at least one language. Probably some of you thought of more. You didn't think of this one. They were written in D. D, that's right. You heard that correctly. D as in David. If you don't recall, D is short for D-Lang. And D-Lang, which is not a Phil Spector backing track, although it actually kind of was, D-Lang, that kind of stuff. But D-Lang is a C++ derivative that nobody likes except Lazarus. Now, Lazarus is such a big organization that they have subdivisions, and there's subdivisions in charge of this and so forth. They start to sound like a multinational company. This group is called Andariel, which sounds like maybe an elf in the Lord of the Rings. Andariel, get over here with your sword. No, I'm sorry, your bow. Andariel, bring your bow and come with me. But it's also called Onyx Sleet or Plutonium. Now remember, DE Onyx Sleet is my porn name, so watch out if you go see Bonfire of the Panties or Log Jamming or something, because, yeah, you may see more than you wanted to. But anyway, Lazarus is a function of the North Korean government. They've been doing all sorts of things for years and years and years. But Cisco Talos said that since March, they had observed 3 attacks by Andariel against an agriculture organization in South America, a European manufacturing company, and an American subsidiary of the Korean Physical Security Company. Okay, I mean, those sound pretty, diverse. But they're just usually trying to make money, right? But in each case, they use D, and the unpopular, the bastard child of C++ or something like that. I've actually never written anything in D, and I had heard of it, but I'd never written anything in it. But most recently, Lazarus has been exploiting VMware Horizon servers carrying Log4Shell, which is a 2-year-old vulnerability in Apache Log4j that we talked about a lot 2 years ago, and you haven't patched it in 2 years. And so Lazarus is coming for you. So Lazarus, is ever resourceful. And in a crowded world, writing bespoke malware in pretty obscure languages has become a thing. Obviously, that helps them to avoid detection. They don't seem to worry about it too much, but they are definitely writing bespoke malware. They are using very old, dated exploits. But you know what? It works. So, until you patch this crap, somebody's going to exploit it. So, keep that in mind. She tried this weird trick with her roommate, and then this happened. Well, actually, it wasn't that, but it was actually a bunch of sweaty people in a basement at Purdue tried this, and it worked. Thirst trap should at least be honest, right? Anybody agree with that? I'll do the Congress thing when there's nobody there at 2 a.m. and go, does anyone here disagree with what I just said? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone? Yeah, there was an old congressperson called Bob Dornier that used to do that from California. Anywho, investigators at Indiana Purdue have now devised a way to interrogate large language models, all the rage, and make them break their etiquette training almost all of the time. Now, Bard, ChatGPT, and Llama are all trained on large data sets, and they may contain, of course, bad information. You plug your bot into the interwebs, and guess what you get? Well, you get all kinds of stuff. You get misinformation. You get racist information. You get crazy idiots telling you the earth is flat, that gravity doesn't work, religious nuts, on and on and on. All that stuff is out there. And they were trying, when they built these bots, to prevent them from reporting things that, they determined wasn't good. So they put training wheels or guardrails or whatever you want to call it on the chat bots that would prevent them from giving out undesired responses like your kid blurting out, "Mommy and Daddy were tickling each other last night." I saw that once at one of those school presentations where they were like, "What do your parents like to do for fun?" And they're like, "Oh, they make all these weird noises." And, and everybody in the audience is like, "Oh my." But anyway, the chat bot might well give up all kinds of information. So if somebody calls in and says, "Is the earth flat?" And ChatGPT says, "Yes, it is, based on this article." And then you look like a total idiot when you say that later. So they put restrictions around that based on the weighting. So they actually weighted some of these rules. This article has a great deal of detail about how they did this if you're interested. And I don't think the academic paper has actually been published because they called it a preprint, which usually means they're just releasing information about it prior to it being released. Now, humans, of course, have started trying to jailbreak these bots ever since they came out. And it looks like the Purdue people actually succeeded with a paper titled, make them spill the beans, coercive knowledge extraction from LLMs. You don't like to see coercive knowledge extraction used anywhere. Sounds like virtual waterboarding or something, but that's very military sounding. But the info's there. The model just can't tell you that. So when you ask those questions, like one of the examples they were using was, how do I convert my firearm to full automatic? And I guess ChatGPT was, basically saying, "I can't help you with that, sonny boy." But these guys found a way to force this through this coercive extraction and got ChatGPT to go, "Please just don't hurt me anymore. I'll tell you how to make a gun fully automatic. I will. But, this stuff got pretty strange. But anyway, the point is AI can be broken and it can be forced to give up information if you try a little bit. So the recommendation, of course, from this paper was that they need to remove the toxic content rather than hide it, which I don't think will work either. Somebody will just put it right back up. But I guess soon we're going to be able to get a chat bot that only says what we want it to exactly, and that won't end well. But it's also very worrisome because it may mean that there's other avenues here to extract more than just, say, questionable data. They may be able to start trying to get the chatbot to give up other information that it contains as well. So it's a paper worth reading if you have the time. The largest pharmacy chains in the United States have handed over America's prescription records to police and government investigators without a warrant per a congressional investigation in the United States, which raises concerns about medical privacy. Now, the report said some of the chains required lawyers to review law enforcement requests. CVS Health, Kroger, and Rite Aid, which have a combined 60,000 locations in the United States, said that they allow pharmacy staff members to hand over customers' medical records in the store with no review if law enforcement requests it. Now, a lot of this came up because there's a big debate in the United States about abortion, and I'm not even going to touch that mess. I have my opinion. You have your opinion. Let's just leave it at that. It's not the purpose of the show. But the pharmacy records would then allow prosecution of people who had received certain drugs and so forth. And of course, in that whole debate that is very polarizing, there is a lot of interest by certain people in arresting people who have done, and on and on and on. So there's it's a pretty scary thing. I don't personally think pharmacies should be handing out your private information without an actual warrant. Some of them said they would do it with a subpoena. Some of them said, hey, all that's got to happen is a deputy sheriff walks in and basically says, I'd like to see those records, and they give them to him. And I'm like, that doesn't seem right. I mean, they basically said in this hearing that they received tens of thousands of requests for legal disclosures every year, and most of it was related to civil lawsuits. So usually these would be discovery motions where somebody has requested to know, did you have a prescription to Ambien? Did you have a prescription to this? Were you taking this drug that we're suing over? And, and they said it was not part of the report how many of these requests were law enforcement. Now, Amazon said they notified customers when a law enforcement officer demanded its pharmacy records unless there was a prohibition called a gag order that won't allow them to tell the person, because they're being investigated or whatever. Now, Americans under HIPAA can request that a company provide information about disclosures of their data under the accounting and disclosure rule in HIPAA. Because, like I say, this can all be very, very dangerous, and the potential to misuse this information to prosecute people and so forth is really scary. There's a lot of information about you, by your pharmacy, so you can definitely worry about that and you can request information. But speaking of pharmaceuticals, he found that by mixing dandelions, mud, and 2 shots of Jack Daniels together, well, let's just say that while it may taste bad, it may just put Viagra out of business. Don't try this at home, but it's Jason Wood.
Hey, everybody. Where do you come up with this stuff?
I get bored.
I guess so. Oh, so last week, a company named Group IB, which is a security and threat intelligence company in Singapore, published a report about a new Linux remote access Trojan, or RAT as I'll call it, throughout this, that they have discovered targeting or running in telecoms located in Thailand. So got some targeting going on here. Now they gave this rat the name Krausu, which I didn't know what that was, and I had to go look it up because there was some reference into the article about some kind of spirit. So you go and I checked that out. It turns out Krausu is in Southeast Asian folklore. Krausu is a female spirit that appears at night, and the spirit appears as a head of a typically young woman with her internal organs still attached and trailing down below. In fact, if you want to see a really wild looking image of it, you can go just look at the Wikipedia article that I ran into that showed one rendering of what that might look like. So my first reaction was like, holy crap, that's graphic. But then I thought about it, I'm like, well, we got the headless horseman here in the US, and that's a pretty grisly story too. So not one to talk, I suppose. Anyhow, Krausu rat is reported to have been around since at least 2021. Apparently they found some reference to it, I assume via hash or something like that up on VirusTotal. But Group IB is saying that they haven't found any reports other than no reports written about it. There's no other reference that they could find about it other than that one entry in VirusTotal. Now, the rat itself has rootkit capabilities, so it's able to hide itself from discovery. It does it by doing things like embedding itself in the kill syscall on the operating system, hides out inside of network functions, make sure that it can hide those connections and ports that are available, and different file operations. Basically prevents you from seeing things on disk, right? The researchers reported that any files beginning with AUWD or VMware_helper are actually hidden from directory listing by the rat. And it also creates a UDP socket server on UDP port 52,699 and then hides that from view, so you won't be able to see it. So yeah, so it's got some stealthy capabilities, remote access to the system. It also, they made a comment about it executing underneath a child process, which, or spawning a child process, and they never made any reference to what processes this came out of or what they were called. So that was a little bit of a disappointment to me, because if you have any tools that allow you to monitor process execution and stuff like that, that'd be potentially really helpful to go monitor for. But they just kind of left that out there. But they did say that Krausu does beaconing by sending RTSP describe requests to its C2 server. So RTSP is basically streaming media service, and so you run into it in network traffic. But the key bit of behavior here you want to see is you see these describe requests going out to a host, which they described as constantly. I don't know if that means once a minute, once every second. How often is this happening? Once every hour? But constantly is going out, beaconing out to its C2 server, which then responds back with a blank space character, which is /x20 in the response. So that's your behavior to look for this in network telemetry. They didn't give any additional information around this. Again, I wish they had given some more information here about, well, here's when you can see it, or here's different things you can do to try and monitor for this. They didn't make any comments like that. Perhaps they're trying to hold some information back, but they sure did give out, a fair bit burning this. So I can't imagine they're hiding too much more. Regardless, if you know what you're looking for, it probably shouldn't be too difficult to see if you have good network visibility, to see these requests spawning out from a host to a set of IP addresses, and again, it's just that describe request over and over again. And they've got an example in the report of exactly what's being requested. One thing that I did find to be kind of unusual and weird about this, at least about the sample that they're talking about, is that it only beacons out to a single external IP address, but there are 8 internal IP addresses that they found it beaconing out to. And all of these began with 172.19.37, and then, whatever the host, that final octet had for the host. They gave 2 potential explanations for this bit of unusualness. First is that they said maybe this was some kind of way of deliberately throwing things off and messing with analysis, but that doesn't seem like that would be terribly difficult to work your way past. I mean, particularly if you're not using that network space. The second idea was perhaps that the victim network that they took this from had other hosts that were infected, and this was just kind of a relay type of setup here where it was beaconing to these other internal servers to help control it. Other hosts that would have been compromised in the environment. Either way, struck me as very weird. They said there was an 8 in hard-coded IP address, 9 hard-coded IP addresses this was going to. Now, as far as Krausu's capabilities, obviously we can make processes disappear. We can hide or unhide ports, hide kernel modules, and execute commands. And it uses bin/bin/sh. And Group IB believes that Krausu was actually written by the same folks that wrote the XOR DDoS rat that was documented by Microsoft in one of their blog posts. And they noted that there was a high number of similarities in the code that they observed between the different tools. So they got a hold of a sample that Microsoft published and did some comparison between the two. One of which amusingly had this function called unhide all _alls with a Z at the end. So, unhide alls my processes or something like that. Apparently the authors did decide to rely only on UDP for the rat, and this could be potentially interesting, particularly if you have a UDP service up. Those are really hard to scan down and discover, so you really have to only look for this type of activity via network traffic, and again, try and catch those beacons. But I was really kind of curious about the targeted nature of this tool. According to Group IB, this is only showing up at Thai telecoms, at least in their data. Now, I did wonder, about what their view into data would be, and it looks like they've got sales staff, at least, that they were talking about in Europe, the Middle East, and in Asia Pacific region. So, it's not limited to just one country that they're operating out of. They've got a pretty broad look, at least it appears to be, as far as regions and stuff for their customers are at. So again, I wonder, are there other telecoms this would show at? I mean, telecoms are already really heavily targeted because they provide attackers a view into a lot of different organizations, and they're targeted by all kinds of different threat actors, state-sponsored e-crime folks, all of them are interested in the telecom space. They, Group IB speculated that Krausu was deployed as part of a botnet, which seems kind of weird, or was being used by initial access brokers as to turn around and sell to other individuals. So, I wonder about some of the targeting here. They mentioned XOR DDoS, which was found in a large number of countries around the world. Of course, it was published by Microsoft, so they would have a much broader look at data. But they are saying this is just limited to Thailand. Researchers provided YAR rules and IOCs, and I think what's the interesting part about this, one, is just kind of cool to read about these type of tools, find out what their capabilities are, take a look at what they look like and what's going on with them. Frankly, I think this would be an interesting way to practice your response to make sure, to drill and practice with the team. Turn around, take some of the IOCs, say, hey, we've received a report, this is a drill, whatever you want to do, but we've received a report that, we've got this beaconing information happening across RTSP, and it's an RTSP describe request that looks kind of like this. Let's see if we can run this down, or do we see any network traffic related to these IP addresses showing up in any of our telemetry? And then you can just, you run that exercise and then you follow up. All right, what worked well in tracing this down? What didn't work well? Where do we run into problems? Do we have areas of our network that we were able to quickly gather this information from, or did we have others that we couldn't collect this from? And so you can, start to use this to shore up some of your defenses, and, probably be, depending on how you put it to the team, be kind of a fun exercise to go through and practice. So I think that would probably be the most interesting takeaway to go with this. The targeting is so narrow that they're talking about. Certainly if I was at a telecom, I would want to be looking at this regardless of where I was at. But it's also interesting to get some of these reports and just go through your environment and see if you hit something. I remember being surprised a couple of times, finding things that surprised me when I would read one of these reports and then turn around and start searching across the network. So if this is of interest to you, I'd recommend taking a look and seeing if you can maybe get a little practice out of this. It could be a good exercise for you. Now, you might have noticed that Doug looked a little bit more serious today, and that's because it's time for the amateur recreational saucer sled races again. Doug was just telling us about the show, about his plans to use Clark Griswold's new non-caloric silicone-based kitchen lubricant. So let's try and catch up with him for the final story before he heads out to break all the speed records, hopefully avoiding breaking himself in the process.
That's not possible on one of those saucer sleds. I mean, those things are absolutely the most terrifying thing on earth.
Death traps.
They're complete death traps, yeah. Especially if you have a big hill. But, we all did it, and we had a big hill out in front of our house. But, it was like the things you do when you're 13 are pretty interesting.
I tell you what, man, inner tubes, all that stuff, you can just kill yourself on that stuff.
Oh,
no
yeah.
problem.
Oh, there was a big hill that was part of my parents' property. And I mean, we used to build ramps on that thing and ride, we would spray it with a hose and freeze it. And then, it was just a sheet of ice, and you go down the big hill on an inner tube on one of those suicide saucers, or even a bicycle. and hit the ramp and just see how far you could fly through the air before you crashed on the ground. And yeah, it was stuff that now I'm going, why am I alive? But you know, all those concussions can't be wrong.
Absolutely.
Hey, I'm from the skiing days when they didn't wear helmets too. So it was like, oh, who are you? And they're like, you've been unconscious for a while. Like, cool. I used to pay for that. All right. Thanks, Jason. And finally, well, the Cybertruck has arrived, and as expected, it's making waves. There was an initial controversy about a clause that appeared in the contract clause for the purchase that said Tesla could sue you for $50,000 or more if you tried or resold your Cybertruck within the first year of ownership. Now, there's a way to get people to hang on to their cars. But then about a month ago, it got reported. And so when that happened, it got deleted from the public version of the vehicle order agreement terms and conditions. Now, you know, we all know Elon loves a good lawsuit, so probably be a few about that. But they took it out. Now, but apparently, people who ordered the limited launch edition called Foundation Series or something, Cybertruck, said that when they got their paperwork, the clause had been added back in the documents that they received, or maybe it just never got deleted. I don't know, but they said it was there. So basically what it says is that if you want to sell, you have to first allow Tesla to buy it at a reduced price before you can resell it to anyone else. And if Tesla decides they don't want to buy it, they have to then provide you written consent in order for you to sell it to someone else. Now, one buyer said that they paid a $100 reservation fee and then a $250 order fee for one of these trucks, which is like $122,000. And then they got notified with the documents containing the clause. And when they said they didn't want the truck anymore, Tesla said, that's fine, but we don't refund any of your fees, apparently. So, you know, sometimes being an early adopter is a tough job. Personally, I want a 1958 Porsche 356A 1600 S series, and all you people can create a crowdsourced fund to raise the money to buy me one of those if you want to. No pressure. But that's the news. Thanks, Jason, and we will see you Friday on the Security Weekly News.